What's going on, YouTube? John here with Mock Motorsport, and today we are definitely not in the BRZ. No, as a matter of fact, we are actually in my 2021 Ford Bronco Outer Banks 2-door. Now, this is not the Bronco Sport, this is the legit, real deal body-on-frame Bronco. And you're probably asking yourself, why the switch? Why would he make that change? And I'll get right into it in just a second. But I want to preface this by saying that I've owned a lot of different vehicles, mainly sports sedans and sports cars. And the only experience that I've ever had in an SUV were mom-style SUVs, your CR-Vs, what have you. And although they were great, they were never as utilitarian as my one experience that I had in an old beater 2003 Toyota 4Runner that I dubbed War Machine. And the reason that I called it War Machine is because it was indestructible. I felt like I could drive that through literally anything and nothing would ever stop it. And most of all, I loved its utilitarian feel. Now, I vowed that one day after selling it, that I would replace it with something like it, even a new 4Runner. And I looked at many new 4Runners, but I really had a hard time justifying their $60,000 plus price tag for something that felt like it hadn't evolved from its 17-year-old predecessor. And it just didn't make any sense to me. I would drive them and they felt like my 2003. And not that there was anything in particular that was wrong with that. It's just you would expect that after so many years it would eventually evolve. Now, I had always had a little bit of an itch to get an FJ Cruiser. I loved its short wheelbase and its style, and there's a cult following that comes with that vehicle for many obvious reasons. I love the fact that it shared the same power plant as the 4Runner did. I also really love the fact that it had that same utilitarian feel, but I really was having a difficult time justifying spending $30,000, $40,000 on a used, well-maintained FJ Cruiser that truthfully was already 10, 12 years old and had 250,000 kilometers already on the clock. Yeah, they're going for that much. The used car market is absolutely nutty. Now, the next obvious option would be a Jeep. And for everyone who owns a Jeep that's watching this, sorry, I don't like Jeeps. I know that there's a huge following for them, and for obvious reasons. I mean, they are the cult classic. However, I don't like the way they feel. With your solid front axle and steering box, it's always wandering. You gotta fight it and struggle with it all the time. It's a tiring drive. And I get to some that that's part of the appeal of owning one. But for me, I just wasn't really feeling it. I've had the pleasure of driving a lot of different vehicles in my lifetime. Having had worked in the automotive industry, that was kind of one of the perks. And I remember the first time I drove a Jeep Wrangler, I was absolutely convinced something was wrong with the tie rods. As a matter of fact, I drove it back to the dealer and I told the mechanic that was working on it, you got to check that thing again because I swear those wheels are going to come right off the front of the thing. It was so bad. And he said, no, that's just the way they drive. And I couldn't believe it. And other Jeep guys that had worked at the dealership, who had either owned or had previously owned a Jeep, said, no, that's pretty much what you can expect. So I said to myself, I can't. Having had come from sports cars and sports sedans, and that precise feeling, that precision feeling when driving it, I couldn't go into something that felt like sloppy and like a wet noodle, literally. It just wasn't for me, and I couldn't do it. But it was looking like that would be my only option. However, luckily for me, the reincarnation of the Bronco was released. And after I had seen initial and preliminary photos, I was convinced. I was absolutely sold on the styling, and I basically said and committed to buying one based on the style alone. I remember saying that even if it drove like a Jeep, I was going to buy it regardless based on its style because I absolutely loved this rendition. What they had done, Ford had done a remarkable job reinventing the Bronco. Several months, if not a year later, I finally see a Bronco on the road, and I am absolutely in love with the thing, and it looked just as good on the road as it did in all of the preliminary photos and press release stuff. And I was convinced I gotta run to the dealer and get one. Lo and behold, we're in this used car and new car crisis and the microchip shortage and all that other good stuff. It was looking pretty grim. As a matter of fact, I went online to go spec one out, and the best estimates that I was receiving was probably 6 to 9 months at best. So the option or the opportunity for me getting a Bronco was looking pretty thin. I luckily found my local dealer had just taken delivery of 6 of them, all pre-sold, but mine had not been accounted for, and it hadn't even been inventoried when I saw it for the very first time. I love its short wheelbase and moreover its front independent suspension. It makes this feel more like a car than an actual truck, but being built body on frame still gives you that truck feel and rugged structure. The 10-speed auto is quick shifting and mated to the 2.3 liter inline turbo 4-cylinder makes for a far more powerful feel with loads of torque and more than enough straight line speed for a heavy truck while providing reasonable fuel economy. Providing 300 horsepower and 325 pound-feet of torque, you'll find that this is more than adequate, and if it weren't for the fact that the Bronco has the aerodynamics of a brick and its weight, it would likely accelerate many of my past sports sedans and sports cars. No joke. That being said, its size and shape are quite apparent on windy days and winding roads respectively. Although it carries its weight well and handles decently, it's certainly not hitting any apexes anytime ever. Now some of you are going to ask, why the switch? Why did you go from your BRZ and many other sports cars and go to a Bronco? Well, I'm glad you asked. There's actually a lot more to it than it would appear. I've always kind of prioritized my sports car or my fun car over my daily, and sometimes I've made even compromises to making my daily my fun car or sports car, and that doesn't always transition well. If any of you have attempted to try to be professional and have had a modified car, you'll understand this better than anybody else. As a matter of fact, you don't even need to be a professional. If you're on a long drive with a loud exhaust and a rugged suspension, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. In closing, an opportunity has presented itself to me, which is basically going to eliminate the need or want to have a sports car or performance car in my life. That's not to say that I'm going to give that up entirely, but if you hang around on the channel long enough, it'll become quite apparent as to what I'm up to. I'll give you a little teaser. It might have something to do with racing, but not in a vehicle of my own. That may or may not be a BRZ. And we'll leave it at that. So in closing, I absolutely love my Bronco. I've had it now for 7,500 kilometers, and it's been amazing. It has been an absolute pleasure to own and a pleasure to drive. It does everything I need it to do, and it does it very well. On that note, stay tuned for more adventures in my Bronco. I plan on doing a few things to it. I'm not going to get carried away. After all, this is my daily. However, the aftermarket is definitely abundant for this, so I do have some plans. And as always, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. Feel free to drop me a comment. Until next time, see you in the next video.